Good evening, everybody. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask that all present silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of technology during council meetings. It is 6:30 p.m. I'll call this meeting of Brighton Council to order, and I'll begin with an Indigenous land acknowledgement. The municipality of Brighton Council recognizes and acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, now of Alderville. The Mississauga peoples agreed through treaties with the Crown to mutual sharing obligations and responsibilities as stewards of the lands and waters. We recognize that these are now our shared obligations in partnership to continue to protect the land and the water that we now know as Brighton. In doing our work, Council honors the Indigenous ancestors who came before us and who continue to be present on these lands which we occupy. We acknowledge and honor the First Nations who continue to hold and share their rich history, traditions, and cultures that are proud, modern, and vibrant. As we move forward, we hope that every time we gather, we acknowledge all of those who came before us. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council approve the November 4th, 2024 Council agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Members of Council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Mayor. So on October 19th, the Deputy Mayor and I attended the Brighton Arts and Culture Council Gala, where we both shared the presentations of four of their members this year: Cindy Conlon, Dan Buchanan, Mary McEwen, and Rod Wandling. It was a lovely evening. It was great.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Can I have another one?
You may.
So then the next week, on October the 27th, I attended the Trunk and Treat in Codrington. It was a little cool and windy, but we shared out to about 300 kids again this year. It was another great event that we had there.
So it's always a good event. I'm sorry I wasn't
It
able
was
to go.
it was fun. It was a little cooler than the year before, but kids were great. Kids were all very mannerly, and everybody had a good time.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Any other announcements?
Yeah, one more.
Go ahead.
Because next week during the planning meeting, we don't usually share announcements, but I just want to share with everyone to keep in mind that on Friday, November the 15th, is Santa Claus will be in Brighton starting at 6 o'clock in Memorial Park with Light Up Brighton, hosted by the DBIA, free hot chocolate and snacks. So hope to see everybody there.
Thank you for that. Are there any other announcements? I also have three. Two of them are pretty lengthy, so I'll start with the good one. Tammy and I were able to come to the Municipal Center on Halloween and dole out for trick-or-treaters. We had about 100 kids show up as they passed through here and into the library and over to the fire hall. It was always nice to see the kiddies come out for their treats. So at one point we were starting to ration treats. We were running out, so it was a good night. I'd also like to take a moment to address some recent statements and concerns regarding the motion passed by Brighton Municipal Council concerning mute swans in our area. It has come to my attention that there are misconceptions circulating about Council's intentions, particularly claims suggesting that we intend to, and I quote, murder swans in our local waters. Let me be clear that the municipality of Brighton will not be undertaking any sort of cull of mute swans. Our resolution was aimed at raising awareness about the ecological challenges posed by an introduced species that has substantial impacts on our local ecosystems, particularly around Presqu'île Bay. Our commitment is to advocate for the responsible management of wildlife populations while ensuring both the health of our environment and the coexistence of species native to our region. The objective of our motion was to urge federal authorities to reconsider the protected status of mute swans, which limits our local management options. This does not equate to harm or violence against those creatures. Brighton is known for its natural beauty, and our responsibility as a council is to safeguard it. We understand the importance of wildlife in our community and are committed to finding solutions that honor our natural heritage while protecting our ecosystems. I encourage all members of our community to engage in open and respectful dialogue as we navigate these concerns together. Our focus remains on the well-being of both our environment and the wildlife that inhabit it. Thank you for your understanding and support as we work towards a balanced and harmonious approach to wildlife management in Brighton. And I also want to address concerns surrounding homelessness in Memorial Park, as many community members have reached out to me with worries about the individuals seeking shelter there. It is important for us to acknowledge that these concerns and convey the steps we are taking to address them. Our local partners, including the OPP Mental Health Unit, the Northumberland Hills Hospital Homelessness Coordinator, and the Northumberland County Social Services Department, have been actively engaging with the individuals utilizing Memorial Park. Unfortunately, there have been instances of refusal of service to date, and we understand that it can take multiple outreach attempts before individuals are ready to accept assistance. Rest assured, these efforts will continue as we remain committed to supporting those in need. I also want to assure residents that as we approach Remembrance Day, we have made it clear that folks living rough will not be permitted to use Memorial Park, as there are services being conducted that will utilize the entire park. For community members looking to lend a hand, I encourage you to consider various ways to support our homeless population. Volunteering at the food bank or at one of our many clothing or thrift stores are fantastic ways to help those in need. Additionally, reaching out to the hospital's homelessness coordinator can be beneficial, as they often require supplies to distribute to those experiencing homelessness. Moreover, I want to highlight the land use planning tools we have available, which allow for the construction of additional dwelling units on private properties. This presents an excellent opportunity for creating affordable rental units in our community, and there is a grant available through the county to help create those affordable units right on private property. Together, we can create a more supportive environment for everyone in Brighton. Thank you all for reaching out and for your concerns and your commitments to making our community a better place. And I'll allow for one more chance for announcements before we move on. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Butwell.
Thank you for those announcements. Wholeheartedly behind you on that. I actually just wanted to mention, I don't see Mr. Hagerman here this evening, but he did, along with his department, Economic Development, host a Brighton Small Business Evening at Northumberland Fine Foods, really well attended, and a great speaker. So really enjoyed that event, really lovely venue, and a great start, I think, to something that will continue through the years.
Thank you. So any other announcements? Moving on to the adoption of the minutes. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council adopt both the October 7th special and regular council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that Council adopt the October 15th, 2024 Council Planning Meeting Minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. We have no statutory public meeting this evening, which brings us to delegations and presentations. At the clerk's discretion and in accordance with our procedure bylaw, Council will hear one delegation and 3 presentations this evening. Delegates have 10 minutes and presenters have 15 minutes to provide Council with their information. It is noted that language, content, and conduct must always remain respectful. Council will be provided with an opportunity to ask questions of clarification from the delegation or presentation representatives based on the information that they have presented. Council is reminded that this is not an opportunity to engage in debate with the delegate or presenters, nor advance a public policy position. Delegates and presenters are reminded that Council does not make decisions during the delegation presentation portion of this evening's meeting. Our first presentation is from Lindsay Butcher Dodd, the Interim Executive Director of Trent Memorial Hospital Foundation. Ms. Butcher Dodd, how are you? We can't hear you. You're on mute, Lindsay. There you go. Okay, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Perfect. I'm just going to share my screen. So Okay, can everyone see that okay?
We can.
Right. I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to speak this evening. And I also appreciate you accommodating me doing it virtually. So definitely very appreciative. So I'm Lindsay Butcher Dodd from the Trenton Memorial Hospital Foundation, and official on Friday, I am the new executive director. Very excited to be here today to tell you about the very exciting things happening at Trenton Memorial Hospital. I love this picture here, just showing 1951 when the hospital opened to now, and the growth that we are seeing not only in our community, as you're seeing as well in Brighton, but in all of Quinte West. And what we strive to inspire is our community to support the hospital, to provide critical medical equipment, necessary renovations, continuing education for all who rely on our hospital for their quality of life. So the exciting things we have coming up, which I'm sure some of you have heard, are our ER expansion. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on things that are unique to Trenton Hospital. And I know a lot of you probably already know, but I still think it's something that I'm so proud of. And I think the community in the municipality of Brighton should also know more about. So none of the donations are used for operating costs. The government doesn't fund medical equipment, so it's up to all of our communities to rally behind the hospital, which we definitely do, and very proud of that. We have funded over 85 local community groups through the K Stafford Fund, providing bursaries to local high schools and college students. Right now in Brighton, which I know some of the councillors and the mayor were at the Home Bill for Healthcare in Brighton. Gordon Toby Development is doing have done an amazing build for the hospital, and the home is now for sale, as well as many other contractors in the area that have donated their time and their materials to the project for the hospital. We have a student advisory council that promotes culture of philanthropy, and educate on healthcare careers. So we have local students from Brighton School that are on our student advisory council, and it's such a great way for students to be able to give back to the hospital and then maybe come back and be able to be physicians in our area or some kind of a healthcare worker. Docs by the Bay is also managed by the foundation and also a partnership with Brighton and Quinte West. And we receive no funding from the hospital, government, or United Way. Trenton Hospital right now is very busy and has grown a lot over the past even just 5 years. We had 8 beds in our inpatient less than 10 years ago, and now we are climbing 35 to 37 in our inpatient unit. The complexity of the patients they're getting sicker. So it's really important that we have those inpatient beds. The volumes of our surgical cases are also expanding. They've almost doubled since 2020, which is great for Trenton Hospital. We're very excited about these services. Our emergency visits are extremely growing. We are seeing about 35,000 people a year right now, and that number is just continuing to grow as the population grows. And it's definitely a need it's definitely a need for the expansion at this point. We have diagnostic exams, radiology, mammography, the CT, ultrasound, and other tests. And again, everything is just numbers are bigger than they've ever been. Our current and projected levels in the next 5 years are extremely high. It's going to be something that Trenton Hospital's walls probably have not seen. So we're expecting that, and that's why the expansion is so important. Right now, we're seeing about 80,000 patients a year. Like I said, 35,000 ER visits and 37,000 outpatient visits. Brighton, 70% of Brighton residents use Trenton Memorial Hospital. So we're so happy it's there and it's close to everybody as our local hospital. This year alone for the Hospital Foundation, we've been asked for critical equipment. We fund the equipment that's in the hospital, and but this year is about $1.5 million that is needed to outfit the needs of the current services that are at Trenton Hospital. So things like ventilators, neonatal warmers, ultrasound machines, patient lifts, Oslo hand pieces, cotter machines, smart beds. Beds are probably one of the bigger things right now that we're needing. As a lot of the beds are older, we're experiencing with the more patients coming in, the beds are being more used. And, as you know, it's not just a bed. Some people are in those beds for a very long time, and it's very important that they have one that's very up to date and it's comfortable. So each bed is about $17,000. So as we continue to raise funding for that, it's very important. As well as urology is looking for light cables and different types of scope. So as you can see, it's a large variety of what we're in need for this year. We're very excited about the Emerge Stronger campaign that we're heading into. So the hospital is going to be getting, the ER area is going to be getting I guess a makeover, you could say. Still in the early stages of what that's going to look like, but we're expecting in the next 3 years so that it can handle the volumes that are going to be happening within Brighton community and Quinte West. So as you can see, there's a lot. It's like I said, it's at the beginning stages, but we're expecting that it'll be a responsibility of the community, about $2 million. So adding on to our capital equipment needs that we're already committed to, it's a much of an increasement. The next exciting thing that we have is Lumio, and I don't know if anyone has heard of it yet, but this is coming in December. This is for all of the Quinte Health hospitals, as well as all the way from here to Perth and Smith Falls. When you go to the hospital in the next couple of months, you'll notice a difference when you register. You will be getting a band, and it will have access to all of your records when you're in the hospital. So they will scan your wrist, and that information will transfer when you transfer to a hospital. So it's really going to change healthcare in our community. You will not have to tell your story more than one time. It'll all be in your records. I think a lot of us think when we go to the hospital that that's already happening, but it hasn't been. So this project has been in the works now for a few years. It's going to, like I said, it's going to result in less duplicating of tests, the latest care practices, fewer medical errors, and one file, better patient experience. I have a little story when my son had appendicitis back in March. We had to go to Kingston for surgery, and we were given an envelope with all of his medical information, and it was a very scary moment in our lives to begin with. And then when we had to take this envelope that had everything, I guess, saying what was wrong with him to the hospital. And I thought, gosh, what if we had spilled coffee on that or something? So I'm very excited about Lumio. It's going to change healthcare. It's going to really help us be advocates for our own systems. So eventually you'll be able to, as a patient, go online as well and check your own test results that have been done at the hospital. That's not going to be going at first, but it will to come. So Trenton Hospital Foundation, our commitments over the next 3 years are about $8 million. So we have a big hill to climb, but I know our community will rally behind this. And I've already seen how proud, I am of our community and what we can accomplish together. So what I really just today wanted you all to know all the things that are happening at Trenton Hospital and how it's going to affect all the residents in the municipality of Brighton. And, there's going to be a lot of change, but it's good change. So we're very excited. And then down the road, the inpatient unit may be also under renovation and expanded. So very, very good things to have happening. Yeah, that's about all for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Butcher Dodd. I'll turn the floor over to members of council who have any questions of clarification. Members of council? Well, Lindsay, that's it for you.
Great. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for joining us. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the presentation from Lindsay Butcher Dodds, Executive Director of Trent Memorial Hospital Foundation. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, Lindsay. Our next presentation comes from Rhonda Bateman, CAO, Lower Trent Conservation Authority, with regard to the budget and levy. CAO Bateman.
Letting me come and talk to you today. It's always everyone's favorite subject, I know. but you've all been so patient with me, so thank you. I do have a slide deck. No worries. There is a slide in my slide deck that I'm going to ask you to ignore. I went over it this afternoon and I don't know where the numbers came from, so we will be ignoring those ones. Perfect. So next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So tonight, I'm going to talk about our budget subcommittee, the budget facts that we were dealing with, the highlights, and I'll talk about, of course, the municipal levy and our next steps. Next slide, please. So for the past 3 years, we've been 3 or 4 years, we've developed a system where we have a subcommittee of our board members, who usually 3 board members who help us draft the first cut at the budget, and then we go back to them when we make adjustments based on what our board has asked for. So this year, our members were Vice Chair Jean Berhaney from Trent Hills, and Director Bobby Wright and Director Jeff Weldon, both from Brighton. And this year we had an alternate in case something happened. And so that was Director Sanford, from Center Hastings. So, and of course, myself and our Manager of Corporate Services was on there. So we had 3 half-day meetings in August, 2 in August and 1 in September. We talked about our terms of reference for the first meeting, and then we talked about, I'm going to stop moving now. We brought out all the financial information and our needs lists to the committee. We gave them 3 options to look at, and they agreed to pass one of those options to our board. So we brought that to the board in September, and the board asked us to go back and find as much savings as possible. So we went back to our subcommittee and on October 4th and 7th to look at some potential savings and surplus. So if we could move forward, thank you. So as you know, we are a service delivery organization. We're basically staffing is at 70% of our budget, and general operations and capitals usually around 30%. This year, next one, thank you. This year we do our CPI based on August to July numbers, and that came in at 3% this year. And some of the things we were looking at too are the minimum wage increase, which just came in. And as you and every other municipality and every other business will be dealing with the new CPP enhancements for 2025. And we put our COLA at 3%. Next slide, thank you. So as far as capital, what we decided to do was to delay a few projects and nothing that absolutely had to be done. So it has to be done, but it didn't have to be done this coming year. And we've decided, instead of spending way too much money on a new vehicle and purchasing it outright, because it's going to be a large truck, like a 3/4 ton truck, we are going to try and finance it. So that should help our capital not be drained after a year. So that's some of the highlights of that. And our expenditures, we are looking for a new position. 0.8 of that position would be a leviable position. It's in conservation lands, and 20% of that position would be paid for through our agreements, because this would be a combined conservation lands and stewardship technician. So that's where we're going with that. Our operations are basically up 7.6%. We use the 3% CPI for calculations, except for taxes and insurance. We also have an increase in operations for engineering fees. As you're aware, we don't have an engineer anymore. But the engineer we did have was working for us once they retired on a part-time basis. So they have since fully retired, so we have to go out for engineering. We would love to have an engineer on staff. That was our Cadillac of options. And unfortunately, the fees would, our levy increase would have been about 22% with that. So we're hoping that having someone on the outside would be okay, but eventually we are going to try to get an engineer. We need an engineer for the work we do for you, and the work we do on our conservation lands as well. So, and for capital, as I say, we're going to delay a few projects and look at financing our vehicles. So, thank you. Revenue sources. Those are our revenue sources. One of the things that you'll notice on this chart is that a decrease in administrative programs. It's a result of a decrease in operations funding from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for our drinking water source protection program. Unfortunately, this will continue on a downward slide for the next 3 years. The ministry had decided that they would limit the amount of administrative overhead that we could utilize, and it makes sense. However, we are, from a drinking water source protection standpoint, we're the largest source protection authority because we have 5 conservation authorities in our area that we supervise and look after. They've put a limit on our spending, and it's we're trying to fight this. We're working with the MECP to make sure that any excess money we have in that they're funding is able to be used we have a new 3-year agreement with them. So we're hoping that we're not going to go into the red with that. It's going to be difficult. So what we'd like to do, if there's any surplus from their programming funds, that we can just carry them over for that 3 years and hopefully not be too far under. That's an unfortunate thing for this year, but okay. So other highlights on our budget revenues is, unfortunately, we've had no change in provincial funding since 2019. And as we all know, the funding from the MNR was cut, from the province, I guess I should say, was cut by half in 2019. And prior to that, it was $134,000. So we had no change in revenue in planning and permit fees. I wrote that wrong. There's no change in our fees because there's a provincial freeze on our fees, and it has been in place for 2 years. That's limiting the amount of revenue that we can make. The cost of everything have gone up. You have seen a copy of our proposed 2025 fee increases, and we're hoping that the freeze comes off. We don't know when. We found out December 27th last year that they were going to be frozen for another year. So we're hoping the freeze will come off, because that will help us in the long run to decrease our levy. Because we have increased, we have proposed increases that could really help alleviate some of the levy burden. Of course, our decrease in source protection funding, which I just mentioned, and we've identified through our staff exercise, we identified some interest income that we could use as surplus towards next year's budget. And again, we had some savings that in an IT implementation. So we have a new IT provider, and we didn't get them until partway through the year. So we have a little money left over from that contract that can be used towards the funding of our IT next year. So we're trying to save any way we can. Next slide, please. This is, sorry, I just went through that one. Sorry, next slide. And we can go right through this. This is the ignore this slide. Thank you. So the financial breakdown is our overall increase in municipal levies, 157,666. 67,000 of that is staffing wages, including the FTE, which is 80% under levy. And 24,000 for new CPP requirements, 14,000 for merits, and 43 for the conservation lands budget. And the reason we've asked for a $43,000 increase in the conservation lands budget is the last 2 years they've been going over budget because they've been doing so much work and getting so much done. It's and they are scheduled to continue on that trajectory. So if and they don't want to be in the red anymore either. So we've increased it there. So, and again, the COLA and CPI is at 3%. So, and keeping in mind that the levy pays for flood forecasting and warning and permitting and planning and flood and erosion control structures, conservation lands, provincial monitoring. That's the provincial groundwater monitoring network and the water quality monitoring network, and pays for enabling services and corporate services. So the municipal levies apportionment, there's, I've highlighted Brighton's share. So it's basically gone up $25,420. The category 2 and 3 programs for Brighton, under our memorandum of understanding, we said we would not increase the fees on that any more than the levy increase would be. So the majority of that is due to the installation of that 20% salary line for the conservation lands position, who will actually be doing some private land stewardship. So next slide, please. And this is a really good one. I wanted to compare apples and apples and not apples and oranges, because what we get for assessment is not what you get for your municipal assessment. So I've used your municipal assessment numbers to calculate that the cost per $100,000 of assessment for our levy is $14.43, or 0.014% of $100,000 of assessment. So the values we get from M&R are not the same as what you get. I'm petitioning M&R to make some changes in that, because I don't like comparing apples and oranges. So we'll see where they go with that one. And last slide is next steps. So I'm here to receive comments from my municipalities. I'm doing my dog and pony show, and I'll bring comments back for the board at our December 12th meeting. That's when we're looking for approval. We do have a meeting next week, and I will be bringing any comments I have up until then to the board as well. So they will either ask us to make changes on the 12th or approve the budget. So, and that's it.
Thank you, CAO Bateman. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you. Question, you referenced merits. Can you just please elaborate on what merits are?
So the merits would be for our staff members. We generally have, we do merit increases on a 2-year average. So those who qualify, those staff members who qualify, I believe there were 8 this year that qualify for merits going in the next year.
Quick follow-up. So for the average person watching this at home, what does that mean? So
A 3% increase.
over and above the 3%
Yes.
COLA? So 6%?
It's a step increase.
Step increase. And what are your ranges? Like, are we talking about, so it's every 2 years they bump up?
Yeah,
Or
until they reach the max. We only have 5 steps.
5 steps. And what is the total number of years for those 5 steps? It's 10 years?
About 10. Yeah, it depends on where they start.
So your progression
matrix.
table is a total of 10 years
Basically,
in 2-year increments.
if you start at the step 1, yeah.
And how many people are still in that progression table?
We have quite a few in the progression table. We had a few retirements, so we have some new staff coming in. So over the next, if everyone stays, then 10 years, everyone will be at the top. But it's about, I'd hate to say, don't quote me on this, probably about at least 60% are on the table not at the top. Maybe
Okay.
a few more, maybe a little more.
So is that just because that's the first time I've heard about this or noticed it in any of the reports.
Ah.
And maybe it's because it's the first time they've been in the reports. I don't know if you
It-
saw merits or
The
if
re-
I didn't pick
Yeah,
up
the
on it.
reason it was in the report was because it was such a large
Mhm,
segment of what we're looking at. It's only 14,000.
mhm,
If you look at it, the
mhm.
grand scale, it's not that much.
I'm accustomed to seeing progression tables that are much shorter and they're front loaded, 18 months, 24 months. And it's more based on moving from
Yeah.
through the job rate and the oh, I'm losing the words. There's like a starting salary, a top salary,
Mhm.
and you move through that.
Mhm.
And then from then on, it's just cost of living increases.
Yes. That's how our table is.
But it's 10 years long.
It is, but it doesn't have to be. It depends on performance. It depends on if you're just starting,
Mhm.
you don't wait 2 years.
Okay.
It's up to my discretion based on their performance reviews
Okay.
and that. But the average after you get through the first step is 2 years. So I guess
2
it's an 8-year table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions of clarification from members? Councillor Wield.
Just a comment from having served on the budget subcommittee. It was eye-opening. This wasn't obviously the first Lower Trent budget that we've seen, but nonetheless to see how hard staff work to bring those numbers down meant cutting a lot of numbers that I thought were already at the basement. So we came back with a budget that I thought was already skimming pretty thinly over some things that were sorely needed. And we brought it to the board and they asked us to come back and cut it down. And our staff cut it in half again after that.
Percentage wise.
Percentage wise, the increase, not the budget, the increase.
We're not
but
that good.
Nonetheless, very, very impressive to see what they were able to do without sacrificing too much of our effectiveness. But nonetheless, our effectiveness is something that we always have to fight for. The province continues to defund conservation authorities across the board, limiting what they can do and then limiting what resources they have to do what's still left in their portfolio. And it's a very clear example of direct downloading, except that they have not necessarily given lower tier municipalities or the responsibility for funding this. They've just given us the choice between funding it or losing it. So I hope we continue to fund it.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. A question regarding source water protection,
Yes.
right? You say that Lower Trent Conservation is responsible for how many conservation areas? 5. Does that take a lot of staff time to look after that? Is it, I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah.
So is it something that maybe some of these conservation areas should take on their own to take the load off you?
It's written in regulation that we are the lead conservation authority for the 5. So without changing regulations, they're not going to do that. We have a coordinator for the 5. The province pays for their salaries and everything. So that part of it's not so bad. It's the administrative overhead that they've taken and put a limit on. So we estimated our costs as well over $100,000 a year. And they want to top us out at 50,000. So they're starting by cutting us to 75 this year, 60 next year, and 50,000 by the 3rd year. So instead of having an increase, we're just going straight down. I'm hoping we can do something before that, before that 3rd year. I'm not going to say lobbying because I don't think we're allowed to do that, but we're pushing hard. Let's put it that way.
Another question?
I do, if I
Go
can.
ahead.
You say you no longer have a full-time engineer and that any engineering work that you require now, you'll have to source out,
Mhm.
which is also very expensive, right?
Yeah.
Can you just give me an example exactly what an engineer for the Lower Trent Conservation Area, what responsibilities they would have or what their job is, just a little bit to give me an idea?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So they would be heavily involved in our flood forecasting and warning and doing modeling. They would be doing flood models as well, and part of the flood team. They are the ones who do the stormwater reviews and any projects that we get that have engineering in them. Our job is to peer review those to make sure that what we're seeing is in the proper engineering up to proper engineering standards. It's a big job, but we can't. I hate that we don't have it. The other aspect of that is any repairs we need to our own conservation areas like bridges and that sort of thing. That person would be able to oversee that as well. So.
Thank you both. Any other questions from members of council? Thank you, CAO Bateman.
Thank you.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the presentation from Rhonda Bateman, CAO, Lower Trent Conservation Authority, review of Lower Trent Conservation Authority budget and levy. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Our next presentation comes from Jennifer May Anderson, Hastings, Prince Edward, Ontario Health Team, regarding primary health care. And as you approach, I should have noted that Councillor Fredis did send us regrets for this evening, and I forgot to say that at the beginning of the meeting. Ms. May Anderson. Could you push the button right in front of you? There you go.
There we go. Now I'm live.
There you are.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be able to come before you tonight to speak about primary care in our region. I have some wonderful colleagues with me from Quinte Health, as well as our Hastings and Prince Edward, Ontario Health Team. You may be wondering why. I also should say that I'm the Executive Director of Lakeview Family Health Team, which has a clinic here in Brighton, as well as one in Quinte West. So you might be wondering why someone's coming from Hastings and Prince Edward County when Brighton is in the fine county of Northumberland. We are also, as Lakeview Family Health Team, because we have a site in Quinte West, we're members of the Hastings and Prince Edward Ontario Health Team, and we're also members of Ontario Health Team Northumberland. So I might get to come before you twice as often. So you can carry on to the next slide. So in June 2023, the Hastings and Prince Edward Ontario Health Team did a number of delegations to council just around the Ontario Health Team's work around primary care in our region. And at that time, all of the organizations involved in primary care had decided to come together around a common aim that all residents in Hastings and Prince Edward counties would have access to primary care. And so today we're going to provide an overview on primary care currently, as well as opportunities looking forward. So we can go to the next slide. There's lots of information on these slides, and my understanding is you have them, so I will not read them to you. But some items of note, especially with the population of Brighton, is that the population in Brighton of people aged 65 and older is 33%, and that is much higher than the provincial average, which is 19%. So you can understand that that brings with it a complexity of healthcare needs as people age, as well as other challenges in terms of transportation and mobility and so on. So whenever we think of primary healthcare in Brighton, those are some things we need to think about. Also, with the population in Brighton, we have some issues around chronic disease. So I was interesting to note that we had the presentation from the Trenton Memorial Hospital Foundation tonight because they're one of our partners, and also that when we don't have access to primary care for residents in the community, they end up seeking that care in emergency rooms in our local hospitals. And so when we look at those giant numbers of ER visits for Trenton Hospital, some of that can be attributed to the fact that people don't have access to primary care in our community. So thinking about hospitalizations, particularly for COPD, for lung health, Again, Brighton is seeing a higher average of that than the province. And directly speaking to emergency room visits, 17% of those lower acuity emergency department room visits, so not the things that we think about that you really need the emergency room for, heart attacks, traumatic injuries, and so on. So 17% of those lower acuity visits were because those patients did not have access to a primary care provider. So they couldn't bring their lesser concerns to their family physician or nurse practitioner. So they had to seek care in the hospital. Next slide, please. So we talk about those patients who are not rostered to a primary care provider, so who don't have regular care from a family physician or from a nurse practitioner, as unattached patients. So we have a large unattached population in Hastings and Prince Edward County, and just something that's important for us to understand when we think about people not having access to primary care is that it's not one kind of person that isn't having access to care. We can see from this number that it's every age group is represented, and in fact some of our younger age groups, 18 to 34, is even higher represented. It happens across all our municipalities. It's not particular to one area, and also that what is happening with those people who are unattached and who don't have access to primary care, so they're missing out. So they're having lower rates of cancer screening, which means that if cancer is discovered or other diseases discovered, it's at a later stage, harder to treat, more expensive to treat, more complicated to treat. So next slide. In June of 2023, Lakeview Family Health Team, along with probably every other primary care organization in the province, put together funding applications for expression of interest for expanding primary care. Our hope at that time for Lakeview was to have an extra 4 nurse practitioners, some other allied health providers, social workers, I think a physiotherapist was in there. We were not approved for that funding. And in fact, the funding requests far outstripped the funding that was available across the province. So we have to, that doesn't change the need. The need is still there. It just means that we need to change our approach. So the folks in Hastings and all the providers in Hastings and Prince Edward County, we had put together individual applications. And when you think about the concept of an Ontario health team, we are to come together, we're to collaborate, we're to integrate care. Maybe that's not the right approach. So we wanted to change our approach the next time that a funding opportunity came around. So this is the work we've been doing because we want to be prepared, much like if in a municipality you wanted to have a project that was shovel ready, if a funding proposal came along, this is the equivalent of what we've been working on, is so that we have a project that is ready to go as soon as that funding application opens. So we've been working since April, working together with all the primary care organizations in Hastings and Prince Edward County, consulting with our colleagues, the public, and we also have Prince Edward Family Health Team has a test community clinic there. Also doing some work for unattached patients with PAP clinics. And our goal is we want to put together one funding proposal that would provide more access to care across Hastings and Prince Edward counties, and including Brighton, as a benefit of Lakeview Family Health Team being a member of both. So our next slide. So this is what our proposal is going to look like once any funding applications come open. The concept is that we would have neighborhood access clinics in all of our communities. To start with, definitely Belleville, Tyendinaga as one community, Prince Edward County, Quinte West, that's where Brighton comes in there, Center Hastings and North Hastings. And so initially our goal is to use those those neighborhood access clinics to provide primary health care for those who are unattached. These clinics would be staffed by physicians and nurse practitioners. They would be supported by an allied health team. Ultimately, across time, our goal is to expand and optimize that allied health team care, and that rostered and unrostered, attached, unattached, doesn't matter if you're in Hastings and Prince Edward County, if you're served by the Hastings and Prince Edward Ontario Health Team, that you would have that team-based care available to you. So obviously, that does mean that we would need more resources in terms of the whole variety of resources, administrative, clinical, capital, et cetera. Not asking for any money for any of that today. Just want to inform you about what we are doing and why we're doing it. So understanding that we're all probably very familiar with the challenge that we have in recruiting family physicians and nurse practitioners. This model of care has been prepared in consultation with physicians and with nurse practitioners. And this model of care provides some benefits for those providers, which may be more appealing. So the practitioners will be able to spend more time actually practicing medicine, not worrying about running a business or administration. They'll have the benefit of flexibility in terms of shifts at the different neighborhood clinics. And they will also have the benefit of practicing within a team-based environment. This should provide better work-life balance while also improving patient care and the care for residents in the community. Anyone who has been a part of team-based care, has been involved in it, or knows about it, knows that it's the highest quality primary care that you can provide. And so that obviously would be why we would want this model to have that. So what's next? We're not really sure. We're hoping that there'll be funding proposals, expressions of interest open soon. We don't have a timeline as of yet. We're working to finalize the model as a team. If there are no funding openings, or if we were to apply and not get them, yes, we'll have a challenge. How do we do this? How do we provide care for those people in our areas who do not have access to primary care? And that's a bridge we'll have to cross. Hopefully we won't have to cross it, but if we don't have good news, that's what we'll have to do then. But I wanted to make sure that you, as a council, were apprised of what we have been working on, what we're doing, and what we are hoping will happen for our area. So thank you very much. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. May Anderson. We'll open the floor to members of council for questions of clarification. Councillor Wright.
Sorry, just to be clear, through you, Mr. Mayor, does this tap on the shoulders of current physicians already in the system, or is this looking for brand new physicians to come in and operate these locations?
Could be a variety of things. Physicians operate on a variety of models. Some of them might not currently have a full-time practice, or might want to use this as a way to augment their income as another revenue stream for them. So it could potentially be some existing, but I think our hope would be that this would be a model where we would get funding and also interest from physicians, that there would be new physicians or nurse practitioners.
Just to follow up to that, you said that there would be some benefits for the physicians. What kind of benefits are you proposing that would help lure them in?
So the benefit is that these would be not practicing in the same way they are now, where they're fee for service. So it would be a different compensation model. Also, the administrative burden wouldn't be borne by the physician themselves. It'll be borne by the Ontario Health Team, the clinic, however that is determined to work out. So that's a benefit. It's a benefit because if they were a brand new physician starting out, they wouldn't have to set up a practice. They would have that. The Ontario Health Team is setting that up for them. They wouldn't have that administrative burden. Flexibility in scheduling. Maybe they're able to work a few days and a few hours in this one and a few hours in this one, and work around flexibility for their schedule, provide them better work-life balance in a way that works for them.
Thank you both. Any other questions of clarification from members of council? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the presentation from Jennifer May Anderson, Hastings Prince Edward Ontario Health Team regarding primary health care. Is there any discussion from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And our delegation, which comes from Mario Guzman, Brighton District Minor Hockey Association, with regard to the 2024-2025 season and King Edward Park Arena. Mr. Guzman, nice to see you. There you go.
Likewise. Awesome. Good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Brian Ostrander, and council members of the Municipality of Brighton. Thank you for providing Brighton Minor Hockey with an opportunity to address you this evening. I'm joined here tonight by members of our Board of Directors. My name is Mario Guzman, and I sit on the board as the OMHA representative for the Brighton District Minor Hockey Association. I serve as a coach and assistant coach for 2 teams in the association as well. I'm also a tax-paying resident in the municipality of Brighton. As you have seen in our letter to council dated October 2nd, 2024, our association is pleased to report that we have managed to successfully launch our 2024-2025 season. With over 230 families registered, our association has fully recovered and grown actually since the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm just going to take the opportunity to lift this a little bit more. Perfect. Brighton District Minor Hockey Association promotes, organizes, supervises, and governs minor hockey for children ages 4 to 20 within the Brighton District. Our association participates in local league games through the League of Eastern Ontario and competitive representative games in the Eastern Ontario Minor Hockey League. As well, our activities are regulated and sanctioned by the Ontario Minor Hockey Association. Over the course of this season, Brighton Minor Hockey will host over 170 games and host 6 tournaments at King Edward Park Arena. This represents over $100,000 in direct revenue for the municipality, plus the economic benefits and exposure Brighton receives from the thousands of families that visit our community to play hockey every year. Unfortunately, the presence of minor hockey in Brighton cannot be taken for granted. Rules for player movement are constantly evolving, which places the viability of our representative teams at risk every year. As well, due in part to limited ice access, Brighton families often look to other centers, such as Quinte West, for a more fulsome experience. This year, in an effort to increase our access to ice, Brighton Minor Hockey purchased over 34 hours per week at King Edward Park Arena. Ice outside of Brighton was also needed and purchased to ensure our Brighton Bolts can learn and develop at the same level as their peers and at other centers. While our association does its best to provide access and value to tax-paying hockey families in Brighton, constraints imposed by the municipality this year severely challenged our ability to meet OMHA and league deadlines. Further delay would have put our entire representative program in jeopardy. It has been brought to our attention that the refrigeration equipment at King Edward Park Arena and its effectiveness in warmer environmental conditions was raised as substantiation for delaying the installation of ice at the arena for this year and potentially next season and future seasons to come. With the exception of our first night on the ice, Brighton Minor Hockey has been very satisfied with the ice quality at King Edward Park Arena and have observed no correlation between outdoor temperatures and ice conditions. While we appreciate the refrigeration equipment requires close monitoring and occasional maintenance, our experience in King Edward Park Arena over the last 10 years indicates there is no operational advantage to delaying the installation of ice. Unseasonably warm weather in late summer and early fall has been our new normal for the past several years, and the arena maintenance staff has adjusted gracefully and with great care each year to these changing conditions without issue. I've got a tea time tomorrow. It's November 5th. As our municipality continues to grow, minor sports will play an increasing role in our community. Sports fosters physical, mental, and social development. It is critical that municipalities invest in services that benefit all residents, and we hope we can count on this council to support our young people for the remainder of this hockey season and future seasons. Thank you for your time this evening. Brighton Minor Hockey looks forward to collaborating with the municipality as plans for a new multi-use recreational center take shape, and we hope we are able to be an anchor tenant in a new facility. Thank you. I will now take any questions from the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman. We appreciate your comments and your delegation. I'll ask members of council if they have any questions of clarification. None noted, and I know I put my clubs away after Labor Day like a fool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the delegation from Mayor Guzman on behalf of the Brighton District Minor Hockey Association regarding the 2024-2025 season and the King Edward Park Arena. Is there any discussion from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
One question. So just reading the letter from the Brighton District Minor Hockey Association, they are looking to have ice prepared right after Labor Day or by Labor Day. Do I understand that?
That is what they're looking for, yes.
Right. So is that something that we will be discussing during budget, is my guess?
That would be up to council. But we could certainly refer this letter to budget if that's what council wish to do.
That's what I would like to do. Hopefully my colleague.
Councillor Wright, are you okay as the mover if I add that in here? And Councillor Wheeldon as a seconder? I've added and refer the BDMHA correspondence to budget deliberations. Is that okay with you, Councillor Wright? Councillor Wheeldon? Any further discussion from members of council? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to citizens' comments. Madam Clerk, are you aware of any citizens' comments? There's none? Brings us to staff reports. The first report is a terms of reference for a recreational facility advisory committee. Madam Clerk, we've read the deputy clerk's report. Do you have anything to add or highlight? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council adopt the draft terms of reference for the Recreation Facility Advisory Committee. And the council directs staff to create a budget for the Recreation Facility Advisory Committee for council's consideration during the 2025 budget deliberations, and that council appoint blank as the council member representative for the committee. So first, Councillor Wheeldon, I'll ask who you would like to appoint as the mover in this blank. Or would you like just to open the floor a little bit?
I would like to appoint Councillor Rowley.
Councillor Rowley, you're the seconder. You should withdraw. Is there a seconder for
Unless
that
someone
motion?
else would like.
I can second.
Thank you. Motion is now moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. And I have added Councillor Rowley to the line on the third point. So the third line now reads, the council appoint Councillor Rowley as the council member representative for the committee. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next item is the CAO ongoing report and capital projects update. CAO, we've read through your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, Mr. Mayor, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council received the CAO ongoing report and capital projects update as information. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wright?
I was just wondering, through you, Mr. Mayor, how far are we with the ASC? I think ASC, the
Speed cameras.
speed cameras. Thank you. It was there.
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wright. Currently, we are just waiting to complete the privacy impact assessment, which is required to obtain our MTO agreement. So once that piece is completed, it will all be sent up to MTO. We are trying to mirror a similar municipality that's sort of gone through this, although we're experiencing some different roadblocks dealing with MTO. So we're trying to get all that documentation up to them. And once we have that draft agreement, they are asking that we test the cameras and have those up for 90 days prior. So we're certainly looking into the new year, but we should have something back to council in the not too distant future with an MTO agreement.
Thank you. Anyone else on the CAO update? All those in favor? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion's carried. There are no notices of motion or motions. There's nothing listed under unfinished business, bringing us to bylaws. The only bylaws with regard to the purchase of lands back to the municipality in the industrial park. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement of purchase and sale of lands, Part Lot 33, Concession B, Brighton, Part 1 and 2, Plan 39R, 14023 Sharp Road. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Bringing us to reports, minutes of advisory committees of council and review teams. The first is the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee meeting minutes of September 12th and October 10th. Councillors Wheeldon and Butwell, as our council representatives, do you have anything to bring up with regard to these minutes? Councillor Wheeldon.
Unfortunately, we were not able to obtain quorum for either meeting, and so they were short. But the thing that we've been working on is trying to determine whether we are set up to have monthly cooking classes representing a lot of the different ethnic foods that would be representative of Brighton's diversity. And so we have a bunch of people who are willing to teach us to cook their dish or their country's dishes, but what we need right now is more information about whether we can, whether we need more insurance and food safe and all of those type of things in order to host such events. The goal, of course, is moving towards a multicultural food festival in the summertime. Our chair, Mo, has been championing this idea for many years now, and I think we're moving in that direction, but we've had some challenges getting the gang together.
Well, hopefully, as someone who likes to eat, you are able to get the gang together, and I look forward to that food festival. Anything else to add? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the September 12th and October 10th, 2024 Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next is the Applefest Steering Committee. Councillors Rowley and Wright as our council representatives. Do you have anything to add with regard to these minutes? Councillor Rowley?
No, I don't believe we have anything. Our budget for 2025 is included to be passed on to budget deliberations this year. That's it.
I was not here for an October meeting, but I will say that as a business on Main Street, it was hopping. So I was thrilled at how well Applefest went. It was wall to wall in my store.
You and every single human being I met on the street, and there were a lot of human beings on that street. So everyone was happy. It was a good day. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the October 16th, 2024 Applefest Steering Committee meeting draft minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. And we move on to reports and minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. The first is the Brighton Public Library Board. With a motion from Councillor Wright and seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the Brighton Public Library Board meeting minutes as presented. Councillors Rowley and Wright, I believe, are our representatives. Anything to add or highlight here? No? All those in favor of the motion? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And Lower Trent with a motion from Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the Lower Trent Conservation Authority October 10th, 2024 meeting minutes as presented, and Councillors Wheeldon and Wright are our representatives. Anything to add or highlight here?
Nothing we haven't already discussed tonight.
Figured as much. Thank you both. All those in favor of the motion? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion from Councillor Butwell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the Northumberland OPP Police Report August 24 and September 6, 2024 board meeting minutes. And I have nothing to add or highlight with regard to these minutes or reports, other than to say it's been quite the slog to get here, I must say, with our friends at the Ministry of the Attorney General and the Ontario Police Services Board, and many hours of training that I am not finished yet. Any discussion on the motion? Those in favor? There being none. Any opposed? The motion's carried. That brings us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. The first is a letter from MPP Pecuniary with regard to fire training facilities. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support the letter from David Pecuniary, MPP, regarding potential future firefighter training in Northumberland County. Is there any? Yeah, that's what I just said. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the next is with regard to a joint meeting of Northumberland County and the 7-member municipalities with regard to education and training on housing and homelessness. With a motion moved by Councillor Wright and seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, whereas a joint meeting of Northumberland County Council and the 7-member municipalities councils will take place on November 7th, 2024, regarding the issue of homelessness for the purpose of education and training. And whereas based on legal guidance and governance best practices, Northumberland County seeks a common resolution adopted by each of the participating member municipalities' councils. Now therefore be it resolved that the Municipality of Brighton Council hereby authorizes council's participation in the November 7th Homelessness 101 joint meeting. And further be it resolved that this council authorizes the use of Northumberland County's procedural bylaw 39-2023 as supplemented by the special procedures for the day for the purposes of the November 7th meeting. And further be it resolved that this council authorizes the Northumberland County Clerk to be the presiding clerk at the November 7th joint meeting. And further be it resolved that this council authorizes special procedures for the sole purpose of facilitating the joint meeting on November 7th, including that the official record of the meeting shall be kept by the county clerk, that quorum from the meeting shall be 50% plus one of the total members of the participating councils, noting that county councillors shall be counted only once, although they are members of both upper and lower tier councils, and that procedures are necessary by the venue may be used for the purposes of the November 7th meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And from the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, request for support regarding Ontario Deposit Return Program, moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council support the resolution by the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury regarding Ontario Deposit Return Program. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. From the town of Cobourg, resolution regarding involuntary care of individuals. It's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the town of Cobourg Council resolution regarding involuntary care of individuals with severe mental health and addiction issues. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I think it's really important that we not just receive this, but also address this. because a lot of the language in this resolution talks about compassionate care, but it is compassionate care that would go against the will of the person receiving the so-called care. There's been a lot of rhetoric around homelessness in the last while that purports to support the dignity of people who are experiencing homelessness, but then uses the dignity of those people as a way of somehow reducing services to those very people. There's been a lot of doublespeak. And I recognize that the services that are provided are far from perfect. I have been involved in this sector for a very long time. And anyone who's involved in this sector will be the first to tell you, we would love to do more with more. We often do more with less. And the services addressing people who are experiencing homelessness are often Band-Aid solutions put onto what are ultimately the outcomes of massive macroeconomic challenges. And so, there is no solution at the ground level. There is triage at the ground level. There's first aid at the ground level. The idea of violating the rights, and not just the agency of people, but also their human rights, which are upheld by the Charter, for the sake of supposedly treating somebody for addictions or mental health issues, with the idea that they're effectively being imprisoned, and that once they are clean or deemed suitable for release, they will just be sent back out to the same situation that they were in before they were picked up, is unconscionable. And to those who would say that that is somehow better than leaving people on the street in their current state, it's not an either or. Both situations are unconscionable, and we need to do better. But moving toward the idea that we will apprehend people who are already experiencing homelessness and mental health issues and addiction issues, and somehow forcing treatments on them that are proven to be ineffective without their own intent as part of that process. I thank you for letting me speak out against that.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Further, what Councillor Jeff Wheeldon has mentioned, I too have concerns about this because I think it skips over a very important aspect. It skips over the fact that the current healthcare system does not even provide mental health care at a base level for free. How much better would our society be if people who have growing mental health issues could access it at ground zero rather than waiting until they're exploding on the street? I think we would be far better served to have a healthcare system that addresses mental health at the beginning as well as at the end. Otherwise, we are missing the boat, and it won't ever get better, and there will be weaponizing of this level of care.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
Just to add further to that, I had too many thoughts and didn't get them all out. To add on to what Councillor Wright was just saying, I was cautiously optimistic when I first saw BC's proposal to what looked like they were proposing to add mental health care to their prison system. Absolutely, there should be mental health care in the prison system because a significant portion of the prison population is experiencing severe mental health issues that are not being adequately treated. So that would be a wonderful thing. It should be available in prison. It should be available outside of prison. Likewise, how we should be able to house people without putting them in a cell. So all of these things need to be addressed at a larger level than what we are trying to do with our shelters. But transferring it to a provincial prison system is not a good solution.
Thank you. Anyone else? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. And correspondence from Lisa Gilmore regarding Christmas concert at Hilton Hall. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council support the request from Lisa Gilmore for the use of the Hilton Hall for the purposes of hosting a Christmas concert for the community, and that council waive the rental fee. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Butwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We had some discussions very early on in our term about Hilton Hall and some repairs and remediations. Were those completed?
I think partially. Director Whiteman?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butwell. Yes, my understanding they have been completed.
Anything further from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to FYI correspondence. We have two updates from Northumberland County, both October 14th to 25th and 28th to November 8th. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council received the updates from Northumberland County, October 14th to November 8th as information. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery with a question with regard to tonight's agenda? Mr. Green, please step forward. State your name for the record, and you know the rules.
Thank you, David Green, for the record. Talking to point 14 on the agenda, the Jedi Committee, as Councillor Wheeldon often refers to it. According to the attendance record by the municipality, Councillor Butwell has not been in attendance at 3 of the 5 meetings listed. And my question is, what process is in place to review the attendance of committee members and make recommendations for change?
We don't have an official process for that purpose. Should a member of council wish to change committees, they could simply petition the clerk or me to do so, and we could have that discussion at council. Thank you. Any other questions from members of the gallery? And there's no one on Zoom for that purpose. We have no closed session meeting this evening, which brings us to our confirmatory bylaw, moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on November 4th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the November 4th, 2024 council meeting adjourn at 7:52 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Everybody drive safely home.